welcome back to Raw Thoughts with Mackenzie Tiggs, me. I want to welcome everybody back where I bring on guests and we talk about their lives, we talk about where they have gone and where they're headed. So if you would like to be a co-host with me, come on, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. Reach out to me on my Instagram, on my email. They are in the description for you. And I welcome anybody. I have a lot of variety of people that come on, and we honestly just chit chat. You can think of it kind of like we're out at coffee with the lack of coffee. Anyways, today I have Dana Batts, and I actually met her, locally here through some networking events, which happens to be kind of my go-to of where I find people to bring on and talk. But her and I have became great friends. I have a tagline that, make strangers are just future friends. And so that is exactly what you and I have became. So Dana is incredible. You served in the military. You've got 2 little kiddos. You were doing a side business, kind of put that on hold. And now you have completely kind of rebranded yourself into a Lyla's house. So tell us about yourself. Like who is Dana?
I'm 30 years old and I've got 2 little girls. But before they came into this world, I was a veteran. I am a veteran. I was in the Air Force. I actually met my husband overseas in Saudi Arabia, which is really cool because I wasn't even supposed to be on that deployment. I switched with somebody. She was pregnant, had a 90-day-old baby, and I just found out she needed someone to switch with her. So I went and crazily enough, met my husband, and we've been married 7 years with 2 children. And she met her husband on my deployment and has been married 7 years for 2 children.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was
really just meant to be.
Yeah, exactly. So, so I've been in the personal development industry and I studied psychology for 10 years as well. I've been in the personal development industry for almost 2 decades, just working with coaching and things like that. And I really love it. But we came at a crossroads when, there was a daycare preschool that my children were going to out here. They're they're 6 and almost 5, Aurora and Lyla. And they just said, we unfortunately don't have the resources to care for them anymore because they both have autism. They're on different ends of the spectrum. And I was just shocked. And so I had to kind of scale things back and be back home full time with the girls. And I kind of just prayed on it, what's next, because I couldn't really run with coaching as much anymore because it was consuming a lot of time. And I really wanted to focus with my children. So what ended up happening is my dad called me after I was praying on it about 3 days later and was just like, I think we should start a school and like a foundation, a nonprofit, and it be for autism so we can build a school for children with autism. And I was like, wow, okay, that's a big project, but let me take a few days and, figure it out and we'll go from there. And I ended up, deciding to do it with him, and it's called Lyla's House. It's a nonprofit foundation, and we're really excited because we're going to build a state-of-the-art facility, and it's going to be based on Sudbury model. So not a lot of people know what that is, but it's a fantastic teaching model. Montessori has their views, and then we have traditional. Well, Sudbury is really cool because people with autism, they fixate on a certain subject that they really, really love, and they deep dive in it, and they know everything about it. So Sudbury model kind of teaches children from young ages on how to do all the basic subjects, but through the thing that they love. So if it's, let's say, astronomy is the most common one that I use, they will teach the child, whether it's somebody with, a bachelor's degree or a master's or whatever, they'll come into the school and that'll be like kind of like their mentor and their teacher, and they'll teach them English and math and sciences and all of our basic subjects through astronomy. But they have everything from like 4-H, equestrian, and everything like that they can do different things and choose the thing that they love. So we're going to be building the facility based off of that. So we want to do acreage and things like that so we can actually have the farm there and do everything through Lyla's house. But the other thing we want to do is go ahead and build a directory, but it's going to be a facility where we have all of the resources for autism in the Treasure Valley built into this facility with all the information from all these different places. So whether it's, you know, medical and pediatrician, whether it's schools, churches that have, you know, like we go to Rock Harbor, and they have this really cool program called the Buddy Program. And it's where you have two buddies, the main buddy and then the backup. And that's the one buddy that they have for that child with, we call it exceptional abilities, because it kind of encompasses like autism and Down syndrome and all those different, you know, atypical minds, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So they have that one child with exceptional abilities, and it's just their buddy. That's the only person that keeps an eye on them instead of a room full of kids, you know? So then that way the parents can go and sit and, you know, service and not have to worry. But the child gets that repetition with that person. So we want to have, you know, things like that, activities, recreational activities, and different camps and things that are autism related. We want to have all that information there. But we also want to have, like almost like the women's connections that we do, you know, the
networking.
Yeah. We want to do something similar, but it's going to be for parents of children with autism so that they can connect and get together and have people who understand exactly what they're going through and have their own community. So,
right. Have that support system within the facility for
Yep.
everybody around the child that has that ability.
Yes. So, but we also don't want to leave the siblings out, because there are siblings of children with exceptional abilities, and frequently they don't find people who understand it, who are their age and who are going through the similar things. So, you know, really we're just cultivating an environment where these families and people who even just know somebody with autism and want to understand them better have these resources. But the vision that we have for this project is huge, and we're going to be undergoing a very big project. But the nice thing is my partners, my partner is my dad, and we both are very creative and analytical all at the same time. So our ability to work together ends up building the most incredible things. So we're really looking forward to seeing where this comes from and how this ends up blooming over the process. But yeah, that's essentially what Lyla's house is going to be, and we just can't wait for it to happen.
So in what stage are you of Lyla's house currently?
So we're in the infant stages right now. We've got all of our paperwork turned in and everything like that. We are waiting on the 501c3 to come back. We already filed paperwork for trademark, and that could take up to a year depending, but because Idaho's a lot more, you know, small in comparison to other states, it hopefully will come back sooner. But right now we are, you know, event planning and things like that, and kind of getting the groundwork laid out and starting to collect all of the resources for the directory. Because what we'll do is we'll put the directory online first, and then we'll go about building, you know, as things grow and develop more. So that's where we're at right now.
So definitely in, you know, like you said, the very start of this, it's kind of a new idea that we're getting going. What is your biggest struggle, and what do you need the most help with currently?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say finding the resources, like having people come to us and say, hey, these are a bunch of resources we have. Let's add those into the directory. But also, even though like I'm on a Facebook page called Idaho Autism Moms, which is fantastic, it's finding other parents that have ideas and just opinions really about what we're doing and how we can go about doing it better, because we're always happy to, you know, hear other people's aspects and perspectives, because it's not just going to be for, you know, my kids and my family. It's going to be for all of us. So having that community aspect in the creation of Lyla's house is really integral to making it, you know, everything that it's going to be. So
now, you kind of answered this a little bit, but the resources, I mean, locally, are there much resources for kids with autism? I mean, there's that Facebook group. Obviously, you're making this because there's probably a lack of it. Mm-hmm. But what local resources are there for your kids?
Right now, we don't see a whole lot. The sad truth is that there are so many families that are actually moving out of Idaho and either back to or to California because they have so many resources, and they do have autism schools and Sudbury model schools and things like that. So we're trying to the thing is when people think of resources, they think medical. That's like our instant thought process is, what are the medical, what are the, therapies, those kinds of resources. When we think of resources, we obviously think of that, but we think of what are the recreational things that we can do too, because you can't take an autistic child to a place that is overly loud or is overly stimulating, because it will cause what we call an episode, and it could be really hard for them to come down from that. Lyla, every autistic child is unique. They're all different. So we want to have different recreational activities that they can do during summer and winter, where we can go and, tire out our children like all other parents want to be able to do. So at the end of the night, they sleep really good. But we also want to have, groups that they can access and get together, and not just have them online, but really connect in person, because that is really huge to their development as parents and siblings and people in general, but their development as our development as a community. So
yeah. And I mean, what was, as a parent, your kind of signal or sign that you're like, hey, I think my kid needs some extra help? Or what was that process for you?
So different for both. So Aurora was speech delayed.
She's the younger one or the older one?
The older one.
Okay.
She was a bit more speech delayed. She wasn't like developmentally there yet. Physically, she was totally fine, but we could tell there was a little bit of a delay with a couple of different things. And she does, there's a scientific name for it, but to keep it in layman's terms, she repeats questions. Even though she gets the answer and she understands it, she'll repeat it a certain amount of times before she kind of gives up and goes, okay, I get it, But with Lyla, it was little things that, unless you really understood what autism is, and I was fortunate to have a psychology background, you wouldn't have really noticed. So things like walking on her toes, and she would do little movements with her hands in certain ways, and she would have really hard time paying attention, but not in an ADHD or ADD kind of way, but in her own world kind of thing. So we started recognizing that around 2-ish, maybe a little bit earlier. But she was also delayed in speech as well. And she would say 1 or 2 words, but it would take us a long time, like 6 months, for her to do a phrase and things like that. So I started noticing those things pretty early. Unfortunately, in California, in order to get them, anywhere really, because autism actually is on the rise, it would take anywhere from 18 months to 2 years before they would even have the ability to test them, because they didn't have enough doctors to be able to do this testing. When we moved here, it was 6 to 9 months. So it can be really, really hard to actually find those answers. And you have a pediatrician saying, we're pretty sure, but where at? What do we do? How do we do this? So it was really left up to us as parents to go, okay, my child is obviously very different. What are the resources we can look at? So we started reading books and articles and things like that, and really trying to figure out, is it autism or is it this or, something else? So it took us a little bit of time to figure out, what it was, and then go, okay, how do we do this better? So
yeah, with your background, especially with your kids, like, give us what maybe a gradient would look like in kids with autism. I mean, so I think a lot of us hear that word, we know that word, we understand maybe, a connection that we have, or if there was somebody, there was multiple kids that I grew up with that were autistic at our school, but they, went to different classes. Developmentally, what is autism?
That's kind of hard to answer, because there's so many different levels. There's so many different kinds, and they have levels and stages of autism, but you can't really define it. Autism, there's a part of our brain. One of the most incredible things about the brain is it is like the universe. It is never ending. We will probably never understand every aspect of it, but there are just different levels for different children. So some of these autistic children are gifted. Elon Musk, but a lot of people don't know, but he is autistic, and his children are autistic as well. We actually kind of, because of him building his own school at his home for his children with autism, and there's, I think, 22 other children when they originally started, that kind of gave us the idea for Lila's house as well. But he people would never know until he actually announced it. Yeah, I have autism. And they're like, what? You do? You seem so normal, you know?
Right.
And so there's different levels. I mean, there's so much that explains autism. There's, dexterity things, there's developmental things, physical, mental, and emotional. So there really isn't like a really good way to explain it. It is just a differentiation between an atypical mind and, a quote unquote normal mind. I have to find better terminology for that, but that's the best way to put it.
There's no normal. That's
right.
Life. There is no normal.
Right.
It's just what we're used to.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and with both of your kids, you said that the wait list is pretty extensive. What kind of testing do they do to actually diagnose them?
So first, when they go to their pediatrician, the pediatrician takes a little bit of time with them and just goes, just pays attention, asks them questions or has them interact with toys and things like that, and ask the parents questions, obviously, because there's going to be stuff that us parents see that they're not going to see in that hour, And then once they go, okay, she has signs and markers that we think might be autism or something else. And then they go, okay, well, now we need to get you to a neurologist. The neurologist, the testing's different every time. So it could be 2 to 3 hours. It could be 4. They really just want to get a general idea of what the different little things, that
like the pathways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So as of right now, I know that out here, I believe we're going through St. Luke's. They have, I think it's 2 to 3 hours that they'll spend with the child, and they'll try to interact and ask them questions. And if that's not something that they're capable of answering, they'll see what they're physically capable of, and they'll put electronics in front of them and see what they're capable of. And the cool thing is there's, and I say fortunate because this is really cool for me to be able to experience as a mother, but they think Lyla may be gifted as well. And they call it gifted, genius, whatever, things like that. So not only will we do the autism testing, but we're going to do a gifted testing as well. They call it genius testing, but I don't know why, but I have a little bit of a hard time with that word just because, when people say genius, they think of people up here,
right.
and we don't differentiate Lyla from anybody else in, who's better than who kind of way. It's she's different, she's unique. We all are in our own different ways. So, so she'll go through both of those testings. Aurora will go through the 2 to 3 hour testing, and sometimes they'll have you come back based off of their analysis and if they need more information. So,
and getting that actual diagnosis, does that open up more resources or availability to you guys as parents in a family?
So it does open resources, definitely. So there is Katie Beckett program out here that really does help with sometimes the financial aspect when it comes to, because not a lot of people know this, but children with autism actually they are quite expensive, to put it that way. I mean, that's not the best way to put it, but when it comes to all the different therapies that they need in order to not just function, but to learn, can get quite expensive. So they will open up doorways and resources to help you get financial help in that regard, because not, especially, in the economy the way that it is now, that can be, really limiting when it comes to money. So it opens in that regard, but it also opens in just different communities that you can get in, based off of what her results are too. So,
and I mean, it was Lyla I got to meet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us the differences in parenting styles or how to parent, kids, figuring out if they have autism. I mean, I cannot relate because I am not a parent. I've been an aunt, and I have my aunt duties down. But as a parent, I can't imagine, trying to communicate to your kid or teach them something and it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is that toll on you as a parent to expressing how you are to your children and trying to get them to learn, and you're like, I don't know what to do.
Right. First and foremost, I'm going to say the one thing that every autistic parent who listens to this will totally get. It is frustrating. It's frustrating for any parent to teach a child, especially if you don't have the patience to do it. So at first it was like, what did I do that made this way? You start asking the what if questions. What if I did this differently? Was this my fault? Is this, a vaccine injury? You start asking all these questions, and then you go, okay, well, where are the answers now? Because that's what I need to find out. At first, it's, a lot of guilt and doubt and frustration and curiosity. For me specifically and my husband, it shifted because we were like, okay, well, this isn't working. The way we're going about this and getting frustrated and having tears and things, it's not working. It's not helping the situation. What's next for us? And a lot of parents will go and, ask other parents, what did you do? How did you do this? And while that can be really good, it can also be really harmful because that answer for me as a parent isn't necessarily going to be, an answer for another parent. So what we decided to do was start looking for audiobooks. What I like to call my net time, no extra time, when I'm doing, dishes, laundry, things like that. It doesn't take a lot of brain power to do. I will listen to an audiobook that's, going to teach me, hey, maybe this is one way to approach potty training because Lila's almost 5 and we haven't been able to potty train her, and it's been really difficult because we've tried pictures and we've tried, even little videos and books and just trying to speak with her. And we've tried, manipulating it in a million different ways to try and get her to do it. And it hasn't worked yet. So that's one thing that's really, really hard and really frustrating because most children are potty trained by 2 and she's almost 5. Big sister is potty trained, but it took, I think, 4 months for us to actually get it. Most children could take, a weekend, if not 2 weeks, but then they're pretty good and they've got a handle on it. So for me, really, it was my child is going to be different from another child with autism. How do I make this work for Lyla? What works for Lyla that I already know? Okay, music, sitting down in a quiet space, books. She loves books, electronics, things that are shiny and light up. So I started putting together, okay, these are all the things that work for Lyla. Okay, here's all this information. What can I pull from this and put together that's going to make it work for her? So that was my way of doing things. The cool thing is I've had other parents go, you are so fortunate that she lets you hug her and she lets you do this and do that. That generally became because of the fact that I tried to not treat her that much differently. She's fragile, but she's not fragile, And so I just said, I'm going to do my best to give you as much love and care and help things work in your brain and try to learn your brain so that I can help you grow and develop as a young woman. But also, I'm not going to treat you super differently because that's going to make you more fragile. Mm-hmm. And I want her to be able to go into loud environments and be able to still enjoy it. So sometimes we'll go in and we'll bring her headphones and she still gets to enjoy what she's doing, but we just stay close by because she can't hear us very well. Or we'll use like noise dampening, like range headphones or things like that, So it's different for each parent. Both of my children are on completely different ends of the spectrum. Most people, when they meet Aurora, they're like, oh, we would never know. Spend a day or two with Aurora and you'll definitely see it. But yeah, I just, with both of them, for me specifically, I believe in you have to cultivate something for your child that isn't necessarily going to work for someone else's,
Yeah. And I think that's for any kid. And I think that's just for any human. Mm-hmm. But I also think there comes value with sharing what has worked for your kid.
Yeah.
So that if there is another parent, they can at least try it and they get an idea, and it may not work for their kid,
right,
but they at least have gotten that exposure to something different, know? And that's why I love the diversity of this podcast, is because I would have no idea what to look for, how to, interact. Right. I guess not interact. I definitely know how to interact, but look for those cues.
Right.
in those aspects. And if a parent can just pick up one tiny thing that has helped Lyla and it can help their kid and it can help their situation, then, you know, we're making progress for sure.
For sure.
So besides the kids, like, what was your military experience? What did you do in the military? I mean, I think that's a lot of your independence and kind of drive for being a strong female. You are very headstrong. You're like, nope, I'm in charge. I'm the boss. What was that like?
So that started before the military. I have a very incredible, strong mother. Her name is Mary. She is a force to be reckoned with. She grew up in a really rough childhood, but she was the best, like, mentor as a female and a woman, someone to just follow, you know. When I would have hard times with other girls, because I got really, like, strong friendships with boys growing up, and that also came from having a really strong relationship with my dad too, and I had brothers, so I was really I loved to challenge the guys, but that also came from my mom too. She had brothers growing up too. Her and her sister weren't very close, but her and her brothers are, you know, peas in a pod. And so my mom, she would always help me with how to navigate the high school cliquey peer challenges. And my mom was just personal development, everything. That's the best way to put it. Tony Robbins has been in my life since I was 12 years old. We, as a family, love the way that he teaches. His compassion and everything really helped us grow. But once I got into the military, I became a cop. And I did base law enforcement. I did flight line security, and base security too. So it was 3 levels essentially: law enforcement, base security, and flight line security, which was actually really cool because you got to see every level of the base. But the hard part was it is a male dominant. I mean, every branch is, but that job was male dominant. So it worked for me growing up with guys and being able to have that camaraderie. But the thing that is really rough is that you're one or two things as a girl in that realm. You are either the one who sleeps around with everybody, or you're the mean one. And it's hard because you don't want to be seen as either one of those, and if you're not either one of those, you get picked on really hard.
I would say there's a third one, only this comes from my first responder background, where you don't know shit. Yes. You're just there for the badge.
Exactly.
Sorry. Yeah. That's my little...
I didn't want to cuss because I wasn't sure if that's your thing. But yeah, so, you know, either you're, for lack of better terminology, the total bitch, or you're the one that sleeps around with everybody. And I was not either one of those. Back me into a corner, though. I come out fighting kind of thing. So I really tried to focus on getting along with everybody. But then it was, you know, they kind of shove you into one of those, you know, subjects, and you just go, okay, well, I'm going to kind of recluse and be my own person. So once I moved off base, I moved about 30 minutes off of base because I just wanted to have my own space. I made friends outside of the military and spent a lot of time doing hiking and working out and things like that. Things that would make me a better airman, because that was my focus. I did not want to give anybody a reason to come after me negatively. So I did my best to be the best of myself, not comparing myself to everybody else and saying I'm better than you, or I want to be better than you. It was, I want to be better than the version I was yesterday. So that all came from how I was raised, though, in that personal development and personal growth world, not wanting to compete with everybody, because you're going to be better than me at X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to be, I wouldn't say better, you're going to be more educated or driven in X, Y, and Z, and this is going to be my thing over here. So that's really where it came from, was my childhood and my parents, and my dad's super, super loving, and my mom being just this incredible leader. I had that perfect duo. They've been married 30 years. They're fantastic.
Wow.
I remember how long they've been married because they got married 3 months before I was born. So
There you go.
yeah. So that's where all that came from. And just being that person in the military really helped me move through a lot of the challenges as well. So
What were some of the challenges that you had as a female? I mean, besides your work and your job, what were some of the other kind of challenges you had as a female in the military?
PTSD was a big one. I had PTSD from some child trauma, but also from deployment, and just you see some really rough stuff. Suicide is huge in the military. Unfortunately, that's, when you show up and, someone that you saw or met at a party is asphyxiated and died, or they took their own life. And it's rough because people will drown out things, whether it's, with alcohol, which is the one thing that isn't illegal to do in the military, or unfortunately, now they've scaled it back, thank God, but they had the opioid epidemic. That was in the military too. You have all these physical challenges that you're riddled with, and these, like, your back hurts all the time, and things end up getting broken and busted, the entire time you're in. And they just kept giving you medicine. Well, then they switched over to naproxen and did away with most of the opioids unless they were absolutely necessary, which is normally post-surgery kind of thing. But my biggest challenge, was absolutely PTSD and getting limited physically over time. Just before I went on deployment, I ended up having a pretty horrible accident in pre-qualifying for going on deployment. So you have to get your qualifications again before you deploy for your weapons. My rifle blew up on me. I think it was 12 or 15 pieces or something like that. And it was literally what you see in the movies. It's not even a joke. Everything kind of slows down, kind of blurs out. The hearing kind of goes a little bit like blank and fuzzy. And I had someone grab me from the back of my my vest and go, didn't you hear me tell you to get away from that thing? And I was like, what? Totally in a daze, totally shocked, not really coherent just yet. And they said that was from the explosion itself and the PSI, which is the pressure. I ended up finding out that I had multiple fractures in my wrists, which didn't feel very good, obviously. They ended up putting me in a cast and almost didn't let me go. And I said,
Wow.
oh, hell no. I'm still going. She's not going. She's a 90-day-old baby. In pre-deployment training, I burst an eardrum, and that was not fun. That was really hard. And again, they tried to not let me go, and I said, give me 72 hours. I'll be fine. If I have to wear a different kind of ear pro, I will. So I ended up going. Well, while on deployment, I ended up having these wonderful jobs. I was in the armory. I was, cleaning weapons and organizing everything. I think SEAL Team 4 or 3 came through, and I kept an eye on all their weapons and stuff and got a coin from their Master Chief. He was really cool. And I got pulled out of all of that because my wrists literally couldn't work. Like, I couldn't grip the weapons and charge them and do things that were integral to my job over there. So I ended up sitting in a truck, keeping an eye on, locals that were on base that were doing construction. Having the thing that I was driven about, excited about, and stopping my growth because of my physical limitations, that was my constant barrier that kept jumping in front of me at each point. So once I got back, I opted to because I had to get surgery, because what happened is I got ganglion cysts, which are essentially like pebbles that formed in my wrist over time from that injury. It started wedging themselves in between my tiny little bones in my wrist and refracturing them. And I couldn't move my hands. So I said, okay, well, we're going to do one at a time. And they found out that it'll take up to 6 months to a year for recovery, full recovery. So they said, nope, you have to do them both at the same time. We need you back out there as soon as possible. And I was like, you realize, I'm not going to be able to use my hands and take care of myself if that happens. And they didn't really care. So I had to have somebody that was a pretty good friend at the time basically come in and take care of me physically for a little bit. And that was really uncomfortable. And then a lot of the things that I wanted to do after that were really, really hard. I played sports while I was in. I loved playing tennis. It was kind of my go-to thing to kind of help me reset. Couldn't do that anymore. So I couldn't lift anymore. All of the things that were my coping mechanisms for stress and PTSD were gone. And I tried therapy and things like that, and just talking about everything wasn't enough. So I got to a point where I was actually suicidal. Excuse me if I cry. This is a really hard one. So when I was sitting there and I was staged and ready to go, all of a sudden I hear plain as day, call Uncle Mikey. And I'm a Christian. And so for me, I was like, wow, God just spoke very clearly to me. It scared me, though. I thought someone was in my apartment, and I had a 2-bedroom apartment. It was pretty good size. So I walk around my apartment, and I'm like, there is nobody here. That is so okay, I'm calling Uncle Mikey. And that's my mom's littlest brother. And I called him, and him and my Aunt Molly spoke with me on the phone, I don't know, 4 to 6 hours. And they saved me, and I ended up I went to sleep and woke up the next morning and went straight to base and talked to my supervisor and said, I need to get some help. So they de-armed me at that point. I'm not allowed to arm up with weapons until I get cleared again. But unfortunately, my uncle at the time, so he was sober, struggled with addiction. And I stayed away from anything, even though I was struggling with PTSD and all that. I really did my best to stay away from, alcohol, and drugs scare me because I've been 1 in a million 4 times, and 3 of those times were in the military. And I was like, I do not want to be that one person that's allergic to a drug.
Yeah.
And I'm screwed, So I went and I got help, but unfortunately my uncle lost his battle with addiction about 3 weeks ago, and it's pretty heart shattering. So it's one of those, I wish I could have saved him like he did me,
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry to hear that. It's addiction is very hard, and especially with alcohol, when we as a society, that is something that's totally normal.
Mm-hmm.
It is a depressant, and yet we want to have it every night at, with our friends, or,
right.
At dinner. That's how we unwind from our day.
Mm-hmm.
But yet it is, so addictive. It is so debilitating.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's everywhere.
Yep.
Literally everywhere to be able to have.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about, that experience, and I thank you for being vulnerable in sharing the fact that, we all as humans have some kind of, mental health aspect. And that could be, you're really healthy with your mental health. You could be, not healthy. There's kind of on that same spectrum of mental health where you are with things. And just like, your kids with autism, same thing with PTSD, therapy may not help. It may bring things back up, and that's why a lot of people, shy away from it, and they don't want to go because, like, I'm talking about it, I'm bringing it back up. But our brains are that magnificent that even if we're not talking about it, it's still there. Our minds and our memory, our brain is, the pathways that they have and the roadmap system that it has within all of these pathogens is so much stronger than anybody will ever be able to know what that is. But you felt something and you said, I got to act on this. And it was a positive thing that you acted on. So I really am glad that you are sitting here today with us. I think a lot of people within the military, obviously suffer from PTSD. And it's a very, very great, percentage of people that are in the military, people that are in as first responders, had childhood trauma. And that's a lot of times why they get into it, because they want to be corrected. They want to, live a better life. They want to get out of the trouble that maybe,
they want to be the hero.
They want to be the hero. Absolutely. And they want to also live to a better name and legacy than probably what their childhood trauma was showing them.
Yes, absolutely.
And then you get into the military, and, every branch, every, job, there is some type of trauma within that. Even if you are not seeing the people or, going overseas, there's a feeling that you have of that anticipation
Yes.
and barrier that you have already taken down of saying, I could die today
Mm-hmm.
and I'm okay with that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is my job. This is what I'm supposed to do. And so when it comes to you laying on the ground and wanting to kill yourself, you've already stepped over that barrier that a lot of people have to break down before having those thoughts or having those ideas. And for you to be triggered enough to say, hey, call Uncle Mikey. Like, that is a greater force that we will never be able to know, right? You're a believer. You have that underneath of there. But I really give you a lot of props telling us, like, hey, this was my problem. I think our military and just our world, there's not enough resources. We don't have enough resources for autism. We don't have enough resources for mental health. We don't have enough resources even for health. I mean, we're getting alcohol and McDonald's and, like Netflix. Like, those are the top 3 things instead of like yoga and therapy and salads. Like, we need to shift our world.
Right.
We need to shift our world. Within all of your military experience, and especially having that experience, of wanting to commit suicide, do you work with any veterans? Do you work with anything, or trying to tell your story in the hopes of, kind of limiting that for other people?
So I would love to do more projects in that regard. I haven't put an emphasis on it. I was working with a group at one point while I was doing, I kind of had like a 5-year span of going in and out of Tony Robbins' different events. So I volunteered for them and things like that. But I would work with, veteran groups and just chat with other people that, were like me. But what I would like to do, I actually worked at with a foundation called Patriotic Service Dog Foundation. I tried to work with a service dog for about a year. Actually, I did. Her name was Cadence. She was amazing. Their its Instagram is 22-0. So for those of you guys that don't know, there's 22 veterans that commit suicide per day, and we're trying to reduce that number. So my 10 year after Lyla's house is established, Lyla's Academy for Exceptional Children is established, I would actually like to start another nonprofit to help reduce those numbers, but we're going to start right here in the Treasure Valley, where I would like to build, again, another state-of-the-art facility where we can gather as veterans, where we can, just have nights where we're just like, hey, I want to meet other people like me in this age group that's a vet or, that had struggled with suicide or addiction or whatever. And just have all these resources in one place, but also have a space to do fundraising and events and things like that. That's beautiful, that people love. But I feel for fellow veterans and, our generations, we have our older generations and our guys that are just going in right now, that, when you are, so I'm actually a disabled veteran. I've had multiple surgeries since I've been in the military. I just had one about 7 weeks ago. And I understand what it feels like. It feels like purgatory, honestly. And I want to be able to help other people like me who have been through, a bunch of surgeries, who have been through thoughts of suicide, who have seen horrific things. My best friends, actually, both of them are veterans and retired. And they've seen the most horrific things, but what they do is they use it in their essays in school, or they use it to talk to other people. My best friend, to my core, his name is Derek Love. I love this guy. He's 40 years old. Most of my friends are at least 5+ years older than me. And he had been deployed. He did 20 years. He'd been deployed, I think, like 10 times. But you would never know he has his own demons, because he is like the most, his last name, he lives up to it. He is a total love. He's just this, goofy, loving, caring human that is just, honestly, the world could use more of him. And you would never know that he's been through some of these horrific things. But you hear him read his essay out in English and you're like, what? oh my goodness, like this is insane. And then he'll talk about it. But 4th of July is horrific for him. It's really, really rough. Memorial Day is hard on all of us. A lot of people think, barbecues and fun and drinking. A lot of people forget that's our day that we're remembering our brothers and sisters that fell. And my first friend in the military, his name was Darren Syra. And I say was because unfortunately he lost his battle with Ptsd. And it broke me for, I think, probably a good 2 months. His face, is seared in my brain. Not being able to, we found a way to send each other letters when we were in BMT, which you're not allowed to do. But we figured it out. And, sometimes on Memorial Day, that's my day to sit there and really think of him and, remember the fun times that we had too. But some of us will sit there on Memorial Day or Veterans Day and we'll think about the rough things, losing all of our friends and what would it be like if they were still here. Some of us go, man, I remember all the good things about this person and it really sucks that they're gone. But one of the things I love to do right now is I still have friends that are serving. I have a friend that's actually a canine handler in San Antonio and she's getting deployed this month. Her name's Brittany. And she's incredible. But any of my friends that I know are deploying, one, I like to do Red Friday, which is remember everyone deployed, red, and I wear red. But I also like to send care packages. So that's one of the things once we create the facility, I would love to set up, monthly packages and not just, your standard, let's send them socks and mouthwash and all that, because they have all that stuff there. But really send them stuff that's going to make them feel special. So her last deployment, I sent her a pillowcase that I got printed on Vistaprint, and it had pictures of her husband and her son and her dog and things like that. And she's taking it on this deployment too. But, just sentimental things that are, if you were deployed, things I know about you that make you feel really good, I'm going to send to you to make you feel better while you're over there instead of you just dealing with the hard stuff all the time, So that's where I would like to go at some point. But right now, Lila's house is definitely at the forefront. So.
Yeah. And speaking of that, you said something very, that stood out to me, that you would never know. You would never know that these people walking on the streets are battling these demons. You would never know what people's stories are. And it is such a great reminder of those people don't know my story. So how am I going to go know theirs?
Right.
So be kind.
Absolutely.
It is such a gracious thing of just, being a little bit more patient with people, being a little more kind to people, to show them that love, to show them that generosity, because you don't know what they're going through and you don't know what they have gone through. We can see the outsides and we can see, and that's one thing with mental health, right? It's so easy to say, yep, you have a broken leg. This is how we're going to fix it. We don't see that with the mind. We don't see that with the brain. With some tests, yes, you can. But, for the majority, we all are humans. We all look the same. At the end of the day, we all look the same, all in our own unique ways. And, that is one thing that you never know.
Yeah, exactly.
You really don't.
I would love to, one day, create a space where we can have, like a podcast or something like that. That's about perspective, just have little tidbits, little shows that we have somebody invited and find out, what's their perspective on this. It's like when you're out driving, it's so easy to get road rage or just get frustrated and just exclaim in your car at the person that's driving a little crazy in front of you. And obviously most of the time we're like, okay, they're either texting and driving or they're drunk or, you immediately go to the bad things. What if the reason that person is going back and forth is because they have allergies and they're sneezing a million times, or they've got a screaming child in the back and they can only go so far to reach that child before that ends, or the person that's turning that corner super slow and you're like, can you put your foot on the gas, has a cake in the back seat that they don't want to dump over because it's their kid's birthday,
Right.
But there's again, love my mom. She taught me something when I was really young, and it stuck with me my entire life, which is when someone's really mean to you, being mean back isn't going to change it. one of the things that I did was I was going through like Starbucks or something like that, and this woman on the other side had this really bad attitude. And instead of being mean or catty or giving her an attitude back, I immediately just said, "What's wrong?" in my head. So I went up to the window. She still had a really crappy attitude, and I just said, "Are you okay?" And she goes, totally thrown off. And she goes, "Yeah, why?" And I said, "Well, it seems like you have a little bit of an attitude. You have a little bit of a rough day. Are you sure you're okay?" And she immediately like starts to tear up, and she's like, "I've been having a really hard time, and I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to take it out on you." Sometimes we don't recognize that we're doing things like that, and it's because we're in our own brain, but we have to show up to work. We have to go to this, meeting or whatever, because that's how we're going to make a living. But we go, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was doing that." But her being able to just talk about it for a second before I left that window, she was like, "Thank you for just asking if I'm okay, because I feel a lot better just talking about it even for a second. And you're a complete stranger." And I just said, "I get it. I've been there." But I would love for someone to just be like, instead of responding with more anger or more frustration or irritability, impatience, "Hey, are you all right? Like, it seems like you're having a little bit of a rough day." That moment of just understanding, and I have been in your shoes in one way or another, really could change the way our world works, instead of just being angry and frustrated all the time and quick to judge, because we have no idea.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dana, thank you so much for coming on to this. I'm going to call it a show. I'm going to start calling this a show. I just decided.
I don't blame you.
Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. Everybody that has listened, please like and subscribe. Go follow us on Instagram. We've got some fun events coming up, actually, one helping teens with suicide prevention. So definitely take a look at that. Dana, any parting thoughts from you?
For right now, I just have my personal Instagram, but I'm always happy to add people onto it. It's Dana Batts. I will be starting a Instagram. It's going to be called Lyla's House. And we'll have a website up soon too. We're kind of building that right now. But thank you for having me on. I really appreciate you bringing awareness to things like that as well. And I'm always open to do other podcasts and shows and things like that to really share this, so that we can bring together a community, but not just a community of people with children with autism. Anybody that's interested in helping families of children with autism and just curious about autism, you're more than welcome too. I'm always happy to educate people, but also, share my story as well. So
awesome. Well, thank you. And all you followers, have a good rest of your day. Thanks, guys. Thank you for tuning into the show today. Your feedback is very important to me. If you could leave a review, as well as follow me on Instagram at rawthoughts.podcast and email in at m.rawthoughts@gmail.com if you have any guest suggestions.